Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this keynote session. And we've got a fantastic session lined up for you now as we're going to take a look at some of the innovations around digital banks and neobanks and some of the opportunities that they're creating within Asia, both for the banking industry and for each other. We've got a fantastic panel of luminaries lined up for you, and I absolutely would encourage you to get involved in the conversation. So if you're watching on a computer, please just look to the right of the video and you'll see the live discussion box. Please do get involved and ask your questions in there, and we'll make sure they get in front of the panel. And if you're watching on a mobile device, then please just look underneath the video and you'll see the live discussion button there for you to get involved. So really that's about all I've got to say. I'm going to shut up and hand over to our fantastic speakers. So our moderator for this morning is Avril Parkin, and she'll be taking you through this great session. So Avril, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks everyone for joining our session this morning. I have some fantastic panelists, so I'm very excited to get started. We have Avi from the Union Bank of Philippines. We have Adrian from WeLab Bank in Hong Kong, and we have Robert from 86400 in Australia. So I'd like to kick off just by letting each of my panelists give a short introduction about themselves and their company, and then we're going to kick off with some questions about what their company's ambitions are. So may I start with you, Robert?
You're on mute, Robert.
I understand the four most common words used in COVID-19 is "you are on mute." Apologies, guys. So great to be here. 86400 is a brand new digital bank. We received our full banking license in Australia 12 months ago. We launched 10 months ago. We have built a brand new bank from the ground up, fully licensed, fully launched. The only digital bank in Australia to have transaction accounts, savings accounts, and home loans live. And we've been built entirely around the purpose of helping Australians take control of their money. So we've delivered a whole bunch of features and products that help Australians take control of their money.
Brilliant, thank you. Avi, can you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Arvi De Vera. I'm the FinTech Group Head of Union Bank of the Philippines. Union Bank is a universal bank in the Philippines. And about 10 years ago, we started a digital transformation. And we are transforming into what we like to call a technology company with a banking license. So a lot of the innovations we've done have really been to really open up financial services, not just the Philippines, but to ASEAN as well. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Perfect. And last but not least, Adrian.
Morning, everyone. I'm Adrian C. I'm the Chief Executive of WeLab Bank in Hong Kong. We are one of the very first batch of virtual banks that being rolled out by the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, the banking regulators. And we are one of those homegrown virtual banks, financial institute. And our ambitions is actually to convert most of our customers' primary account, moving the primary account to WeLab Bank in 5 years. Very ambitious goal, but I think we can do it. I'll share more later on.
Okay, great. Thanks, Adrian. So we've already heard one company's ambition. Robert, do you have such grand plans in Australia for your bank?
We do. Australia is absolutely dominated by four large banks. The four large banks in Australia take up about 80% market share, depending on which segment you're looking at. So there hasn't really been a change. There's actually been over 100 banks in Australia at the moment. And we get asked all the time, why does Australia need another bank? And the reality is Australia doesn't need another bank if it's going to be exactly the same as all the other banks. So we've set out to build a very different bank, a bank that uses the latest technology, that's free of legacy, that's free of branches, to create great products, great services, and great value for our customers.
Great, thank you. Avi, can you share a bit more about Union Bank's ambition?
Yes, I think I articulated it in my introduction, but let me put some more meat into that. So we're a traditional bank that is pivoting to become more of a technology company with a banking license. So I think that's unique for us because we will always be primarily a regulated licensed institution, but we're trying to really transform our capabilities because, as my colleagues have said, we're looking at the world that's more digital, where you're not going to have a lot of physical interaction, a lot of paper, a lot of branches. And so we've been building capabilities to be more digital rather than brick and mortar.
Okay, thank you. So WeLab is still quite new. So, you know, how do you build a strategy that can compete in a local market like Hong Kong, Adrian?
Thank you, Avril. I think for WeLab Bank, we belong to the WeLab Holdings, which was started only 7 years ago. But as of today, we have already covered in multiple countries in Asia, Hong Kong, China, Indonesia, you name it. And 44 million people have already used our services. So the technology track record is there. And for banking in Hong Kong, although it's a very crowded places, but what we found is a lot of people are unbanked or underbanked. They're not being properly served by the bank because of the resource and cost issue. But through technology, I think there is a way that we can actually convert or reinvent the banking experience into something easier, faster, and also equally or even more secure than a traditional banking industry. So we will leverage a lot of our learnings in the past from a technology perspective, but more importantly is to understand the customer pain point and address them through different things that we offer.
Great, thank you. You mentioned the unbanked. RV, is that an issue in the Philippines, and are you looking to address that type of market as well?
Yes, it's a tremendous issue in the Philippines where we have about 70% unbanked. But also, there is a portion that we consider underbanked. Now, what we've done to address that, if I step back, we saw 10 years ago that if we didn't digitize, we would die. So we saw that 10 years ago, and we thought there was no future for paper banking, if you will. And that's really the large challenge also with the unbanked. A lot of that is, it has to be physical processes, manual processes, paper identification. So the only way to reach that segment is to really be more digital. So we had embarked on what we call a dual transformation strategy, where the first thing we had to do was digitize the main bank. Knowing that we will not have a future of traditional banking, the main bank had to go from physical, analog to digital. That means converting our branches from merely being a paper-based counter to actually being now it's really, we call it the ARC, which is what we call a digital branch. It shepherds people into the digital future. We have ambassadors there. It's completely a paperless branch where, you know, we are teaching some of the more new adopters how to use the app, how to use our digital services. And it's been a great way to really herd people out of the digital age. And a lot of our services as well, you know, the mobile banking app, a lot of the corporate banking services have also moved more digital. But at the same time, Transformation B focuses on the future. Internet of Things, blockchain, all of those adjacent and maybe a little further removed technologies that can really enhance financial services. So we've embarked on that, and we're well on the way to our dual transformation strategy today.
Okay, Robert, I guess in Australia you have a bit of a more mature market, but you know, how important is localization for your bank?
It's really interesting hearing others talk about underbanked. In some senses in Australia, customers are overbanked. When we look at deep into the data, and obviously being a technology-led company, we're constantly looking at data. We saw some really interesting things about what's happening in Australia. The first is that more than half Australians actually have a relationship with 2 or more banks, often 3 or 4 banks. So they might have a home loan over one here, a transaction account here, a savings account there. The other thing we saw was that people have more money coming out of their accounts automatically that they don't see than they ever have before. So Netflix subscriptions, gym subscriptions. And the third thing that we saw in the data is that people make more transactions by tapping their phone and tapping their card in a day than they ever have before. So what this does is actually leaves people feeling not in control of their money. They're a bit confused about what's happening. They don't have a full picture. It leaves people feeling stressed about money. And whether you're high income, low income, or medium income, we saw the same phenomenon. So when we designed 86400, we really set about how do we take advantage of that and how do we help Australians take control of their money. So one of the first things that we did is we allowed customers to aggregate all their accounts at all the other banks and see them in the 86400 app. So when you open an 86400 account, which only takes 2 minutes, download the app and you're done. No waiting for a physical card. you can actually connect to all the other banks and you can see your big four banks balances, transactions alongside your 86400 one. So straight away, immediately, before customers have spent any money whatsoever with us, we've given them value. They can see what's happening in their whole financial world. So it's quite different. You know, we're overbanked and we're helping simplify that in Australia.
Okay, great. I wonder, Adrian, obviously COVID, you know, has prevented people from accessing the branches. So, you know, has COVID-19 made any difference to you as a virtual bank in Hong Kong in terms of your strategy? Are there certain things that you want to speed up because of COVID? Has it made any difference to your strategy?
Very good questions. A lot of people see COVID-19 as a crisis, but you know there are always opportunity coming out of the crisis. Applying to WeLab, I think from 7 years ago when we started our business, is a branchless model. Everything we worked is on our mobile phone, and therefore a lot of our staff, everyone had more than one laptop in the company. So when COVID-19 hits in Q1, we are ready to switch to working from home mode. And through that, we can continue to run the bank, build the bank, and also at the same time, let a lot of the customers outside who may not feel comfortable about using a virtual bank experience or services, I think they become actually more receptive to that. And so therefore, I think for COVID-19 is definitely a plus for us.
Great, thank you. Avi, did you see anything similar in the Philippines?
Well, I think, I mean, I speak for my colleagues here. I think all of us were not preparing for a pandemic. We were preparing for a digital future, right? And, you know, COVID just accelerated that, which works to our favor. But if you step back, we were working on, you know, digital, secure, 24/7, Six Sigma reliability, this minimum hygiene, which is now the standard post-COVID. So I envy my colleagues because they're digital natives, so they didn't have to deal with legacy. So we have branches. So COVID, we had to work hard to being an essential service, financial services. We had to work hard to maintain our branches open. So we were at about 95% open branches, and that was really to service a lot of the customers who were not yet onboarded on digital. But what we noticed was that because our platforms were ready, those who were not on it easily migrated. And those who were already using it, obviously their engagement shot up. So that was definitely the COVID effect in terms of digital adoption. In terms of customer readiness, that's also another thing. And we have a variety of customers who are ready, who are not ready, who will need a little more hand-holding, if you will. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of work these days, where we're transitioning a lot of customers over, depending on their various capabilities. Not like my colleagues here who are digital natives already, so therefore the nature of the transactions, the nature of their customers has to start off with that. For us, we've had a lot of analog, a lot of paper, a lot of manual processes. Even the regulatory environment is still also adjusting. So there's been a transition there, but suffice to say that it's been encouraging to see that transition and that adoption really take up, especially in the rural areas. That's also been a lot of, there's been a lot of take up there. We have a rural bank blockchain platform that allows these rural banks access into the national payment system. They've obviously taken that up because the alternative to that was issuing checks or sending cash. So you can imagine that those type of platforms have really taken up. Our lending platform as well has also really increased in terms of engagement. Platforms, as I said, we're ready pre-COVID, and we've seen a 5 to 8x increase in that. And now our focus is on really handholding the customers through that experience.
Okay, you mentioned quite a lot about technology there, a few buzzwords like blockchain. I mean, a lot of these digital banks are, you know, heavily focused on technology and do arguably say that a majority of their staff are technical staff that they have working for them. Robert, do you feel that it's important to have a technology-led business when you're in digital banking?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, I think when you look at traditional banks, they might have a technology division or have an innovation hub or, you know, something like that. And we kind of look at that and go, you know, if you have a division or a hub, that suggests you're not really digital. We have a team, we're a very small team, we're 100 people operating a full service bank, mortgages, transaction accounts, savings accounts. So we're very, very efficient. But of that team of 100, half of that team are technologists, developers, engineers, UX, UI designers. But the other half are also what I would describe as digitally native. So we have some very experienced bankers. You can't run a bank without bankers. I put myself in that category as an experienced banker. But we only have digitally native people working in the business. Even our directors and our board, they use the same tools to run the business and to monitor the business that we use to run the business. So we don't make any exceptions. You know, there are not sort of one rule for one group of people and someone else printing out stuff over here. You know, we use the Atlassian tools. You know, we use Trello boards, just the way we work on a fortnightly cycle. So we run on a fortnightly cycle for the entire bank. Every 2 weeks, the entire bank sits down. Our developers show us what they've developed in the last 2 weeks in a live showcase with the whole bank. And because we don't have any infrastructure, because we are all 100% cloud-based bank, we were actually able to move from working in an office to working from home with only a couple of hours notice. And we've been working from home for 3.5 months now. And our customers have absolutely noticed no difference whatsoever. But there is no difference to them. And interestingly, we've actually found that our developers have actually increased their cadence and speed of delivery over this point in time, which makes you really think about what you actually need and do you need a physical presence to run a bank at all.
Did you see a spike in usage during COVID?
We have seen it's the consistent day on day, week on week, month on month increase in customers signing up. What we have seen, we already had really high uses of digital wallets. So obviously our customers already use Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Pay, Fitbit Pay, Garmin Pay. They tap their phones, not their cards, predominantly. So we've seen that continue. But what we've seen is more and more transactions online, which you kind of expect, smaller transactions. And I think the really interesting thing that we've seen is, COVID-19, even though a number of businesses here are doing well in COVID-19, the reality is it's really had a material impact on individuals. There are people in the community who it's had a really negative impact on their personal balance sheets and their incomes, etc. So what we've really seen in the past 3 months is the tools that we provide to help people save money have been used a lot more. So we have one feature called Upcoming Bills, where we take 12 months data from a customer and we predict what their bills are going to be in the next 10 days, 30 days, 1 month. We tell you your gym membership is going to come out in 5 days. And since you haven't used it for 2 years, it might be worth thinking about, cancelling it. And so these tools have become really popular because they're looking at it and people are going, actually, you know what? I can save $300, $400, $500 just by reviewing all the subscriptions I have and cancelling some of them. And so that's what we've seen is that, we knew these things would be popular, but because people are looking closely at their personal balance sheets, they're using our tools. They're going, right, how do I take control of my money? What can I do? And they're not used to a bank helping with that. Traditionally they're used to a bank just trying to flog them another product. And so it's just very strange for them to have this experience. We have another product called Energy Switch, where we digitally compare thousands of energy bills in the marketplace and help customers switch their energy provider from A to B. We don't take any commissions. We do it all digitally through the app. And as a result, we've had customers save $300 or $400. So, that's really material in today's environment, low interest rates. And so, that's what we've seen is those tools have taken off much faster than we expected because of the current environment.
Great. Thanks, Robert.
Avril, if I may, Robert, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Australia is one of the highest contactless adoption countries, right? And, I like your point. It's so easy. And you're saying you're giving control back to the consumers. And that's what I love about, fintechs like you guys, because you can focus on the customer experience so sharp and, give them these many tools. And honestly, that's what big banks are poor at doing, focusing on those small little things that all of a sudden are nudge levers that are giving the control back to the customer. So I just wanted to say, I think that's a fantastic way to look at it, especially in a market like that. That might not necessarily apply to a country like the Philippines, where right now there is no control, right? Or there is no high adoption of contactless. So I think that's great, and love what you guys are doing there.
Thank you.
I agree. I think your technology actually enable a lot of things during this COVID-19 period. For example, for Willard Bank, we have a numberless bank card that people can use it for payment. It's a tap and go card. And therefore, people don't need to handle cash. And then after handling cash, they have to find the hand sanitizer and do everything. And at the same time, all the transaction history can be recorded on the card. And therefore, we can actually understand the spending pattern, what kind of vendors that they use, and what are the main time or period they would have time to actually manage their finances, whether it's from a saving point of view, from a spending point of view, or going forward, there will be an investment element going into it. And so I think, technology actually enable us to capture all this data and use the big data analysis and skills that we have accumulated in the past to help customers to predict their needs and also meet them or even exceed their expectation going forward.
Yes, in Australia, we do have, as Alvarez said, that very high adoption of tap and go. And it's to the point now, if you're with 86400, I'm obviously one of the first customers. I haven't taken my physical wallet anywhere for a long time. And 6 months ago, I was pulled over by the police and they asked me for my driver's license. And I had to say, well, it's in my wallet, my physical wallet, which is somewhere else, somewhere in the house. But thankfully, in the last few months, the New South Wales government have allowed a digital driver's license as well. So I now have absolutely zero reason to carry a physical wallet around. I just carry my phone. It's just much easier.
Yeah, I think Adrian made a good point about not wanting to carry physical cash. So yeah, it's much nicer to have those digital wallets, and maybe soon we'll have more central bank digital currencies to deal with as well. I just want to talk a little a bit about culture, because obviously the traditional banks have been operating for many years, and as we mentioned, some people have been doing banking for many years. These virtual banks are really starting to build a very different type of culture, and one particular bank that I like, I forgot the name of, they actually enable you to take your dogs to work, which appeals to me, having two of my own. But, how do you build this culture within your bank? And does that really give you more loyal employees? And how does that translate? Because I feel that a lot of these digital banks are really building a brand new culture. Maybe it's just by hiring younger people, but, what would you say about building a culture, Robert? Can you start?
Yeah. It is absolutely critical to the success of, I think, any new enterprise, any new bank. It's a difficult one because you have to balance, you obviously want really smart people with a technology background, but banking does come with different rules. You can't have you've got different levels of security, you've got different levels of regulatory oversight. And so finding the right people with both technology and banking experience is a challenge. But if you get the right people on board, and we've found that we've been absolutely swamped with people who want to work with us, but don't necessarily always have the skills to work with us. But creating a culture where you are genuinely changing things and doing things at a fast pace, some people absolutely love it. And we find that on our fortnightly showcase, we've got people who just love to stand up virtually and say, look, this is the feature I built in the last 2 weeks. We've had other people who join us and leave after only a few days because that absolutely terrifies them that they actually have to create those sorts of results on a fortnightly cycle. But for us, the big thing is that, everyone is rallied around this idea about how do we help people take control of their money. And, people genuinely want to change how banking is done in Australia. And it's really cool when people get behind that, because it adds much more meaning to what we're doing than just banking.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed Adrian and Arvi are wearing their T-shirts, and even that seems to be something that perhaps you wouldn't be wearing if you were working for a traditional bank. So Adrian, can you talk a bit about culture within WeLab?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, I used to work for a traditional bank for multiple years. In fact, I worked for ANZ Bank, where Robert came from as well. Did the internet banking project 20 years ago when internet came on. But what I can say is the culture really makes a difference. When the organization is moving in one direction, which is, you know, powered by technology change, if people mindset are still remain the same, the whole thing will not happen. So I think the reason why I choose to work for WeLab Bank is mainly because I was attracted by the culture here. It's a group of professionals, mixed professional, as Robert rightly pointed out. We need a technology-led mindset people, but also people with banking experience. So we know what are the rules and regulations are, but using technology to bridge the gap. And that is the important mix of the DNA of the company. But more importantly, I think the competitive advantage of WeLab Bank or WeLab Group as a whole is culture. Culture actually made up of individual. We don't just hire intelligent, competent people. We need people who feel passionate about what they are doing, what they are building, and they want to achieve something. And this is quite in line with our vision of bringing joy to customers' financial journey. Because using technology, I think we can actually make that happen. So we are very selective when it comes to recruiting staff. It's not just about what they are able to do, but is, you know, whether they feel motivated of doing it with the group of passionate people that we actually hire. Is the culture that move us forward in the past, and we want to retain that culture and the competitive advantage.
Thank you.
I should add that, you know, I normally wear a t-shirt and look as cool as these other guys here, but you know, I got dressed up for Seamless today, so I hope you appreciate that. But we do actually have the 86400 socks, and if you can see that, can you see the socks?
Very good. I feel left out. You did say you were going to post me some, so I'm waiting.
Oh, they're in the mail. They're in the mail. COVID-19 is slowing down.
Right, I'm concerned that we're getting quite a few questions coming through, so I was going to save them to the end, but I think maybe we'll start looking at some of these now, if you don't mind. There's one here for RV about Union Bank and asking, how does a hybrid bank like Union Bank and analog make itself different from the digital-only banks in the Philippines, such as Tonic?
Well, we're a traditional bank with a full suite of services, a universal bank actually at that. So for one, the universal banking license gives us a whole other set of services that we can do that other digital banks may not be able to do. That's one. Second, we believe that there's a lot of value in being a traditional bank because you already have a customer base. So you have a customer base, and you just have to make sure that you properly, you know, shepherd them into the future, into the digital future. That said, you don't want to lose track of new customers. It is a country of 70% unbanked. You want to make sure that you have the proper capabilities and platforms to onboard them. Hence our digital strategy as well and our neobank approach. So they go hand in hand. And in fact, the fact that we are licensed and regulated, I think plays a huge factor because we are dealing with trust. At the end of the day, that's the bank's greatest asset really is trust. And the customers have to trust that their data is safe, that their money is safe, that you're connecting it to other platforms safely. And so that, together with being a regulated institution, really, we embrace that rather than try to veer away from that, you know, and we think it's a competitive advantage being a licensed institution that way. I mean, as a bank, you have the responsibility, and the license and the regulatory cover is actually something that you should embrace. But to close out that question, let me take it back to the question of culture that you mentioned earlier. You know, that dual strategies, that hybridness that we're trying to achieve is extremely difficult for a traditional bank. You're talking about, you know, we were not in t-shirts, you know, 10 years ago when I joined, I didn't want to join the bank. I mean, to be honest, I was a career banker in Citibank. I had left 15 years ago. I did not want to go back to banking. I said, no, telco and media are more exciting. But when I spoke to the leaders at Union Bank 10 years ago, they really sold me on the philosophy, the vision, the beginnings of a culture that we're trying to change. And I'm happy to say that over the past 10 years, we have transformed the culture. And that starts with purpose. You have to have purpose as an institution. So our purpose was really to elevate lives, fulfill dreams through smart banking in the spirit of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a Zulu word that talks about community building. So if you look at it today, fast forward today, the digital platforms we have, the fact that we like to connect with other platforms, the idea that we've always progressed with the philosophy of open banking in mind also tells you that it's always customer at the center and you want to enable that community. So it's been a very difficult journey, but I agree with all of my colleagues here that culture is number one. But guys, you guys know this in a traditional bank. Wow. So we were in suit and ties 10 years ago. I mean, this is probably the best personification of our transformation, this T-shirt. But yeah, even our board members now, we go to our strategic planning sessions. My chairman wears a T-shirt. My chairman actually, and it starts from the top. We have a picture of him. I don't have it now, but we have a picture of him laboring through a robotics 101 course where all senior executives of the bank had to program a robot. And we had to race our robot, and he spent 2.5 hours laboring that. So starts with culture, purpose, and obviously management buy-in.
So for these traditional banks, you think that they need to start wearing T-shirts, and maybe in 10 years' time, they will have a culture of innovation, perhaps.
Now the T-shirt is just a final touch, but that's just a sign that we're really very comfortable in our own skin. Whether we wear a T-shirt or a hoodie, we are bankers. And we're regulated the same way. So we felt comfortable in changing our attire as just a last touch.
Okay, I'll go to another question from the audience. This one's from Nith. What are your thoughts on digital wealth management services adoption by digital banks? Who would like to take that?
I'm happy to have a go. I think it's inevitable that wealth management is going the same way that digital banking is going. At the moment, we're entirely focused on 3 products: home loans, savings accounts, and transaction accounts, because it's important to be laser focused on day one and deliver a really, really good experience with the basics. But it's very easy to see 86400 moving into a wider selection of products going forward. We don't actually have to manufacture everything ourselves. And the way we've built our platform is that we'll be able to distribute products that are best in class as well. And obviously wealth management will be one of those. We will obviously plan also not just to show you all your bank accounts in the 86400 app, but also to show you your wealth products in the 86400 app over time.
There's another question here we have. Adrian, maybe you might want to pick this one up. It says, beyond driving a seamless user experience, are there any digital infrastructure that will help with digital banking, like digital currency, etc.?
Yeah, sure. Happy to answer that. I think from a technology point of view, there are multiple things that we can do apart from the security part, cloud-based, and also a lot of the customers concerned about the personal data being transferred without consent and all that. So I think a bank's governance culture and mindset is very important. Rules and regulations in place. Technology is an enabler to make sure those things happen as the customer wish. But I think from a technology perspective, it also allows us to do some product innovation. For example, we have a new product called GoSave, GoSave. Is a product that we hear from a customer's pain point. A lot of them, they may not have sufficient fund to enjoy good rates like at the traditional bank, but they do want to put in a term deposit. Having said that, they may have some urgent needs of those funds, and therefore we create a product. It's a time deposit, but also allow customers to get off if they have the urgent needs a couple of times. But the interest will be calculated on a pro rata basis. So that kind of product in a traditional bank is actually quite challenging to manage, because the rate is determined by how many people get on the same vehicle for the rate that they can enjoy with. So for technology, actually enable some of our product innovation to address the customer pain points.
Okay, thank you.
Evan, if I can just add to that, sorry.
Yeah.
I think critical, especially for us in the unbanked emerging markets, critical digital infrastructure there would really be identity. Identity. And you know, Robert's example about the driver's license, I mean, that's perfect. We need, well, first of all, we need identity, and then it has to be digital, no more card. And if you want to increase adoption, I think for me, that's the basic infrastructure that most emerging countries will need, which of course the developed countries already have.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, that comes on to one of the questions from the audience, from Gaurav. He's asking, what are the delivery challenges in building products offerings with remote teams, particularly when you're working with multiple partners providing APIs? I guess there must be security concerns and third-party risk management that needs to take place as we see more platforms interacting with other ecosystems. How do you manage those challenges? Avi, would you like to pick that up?
Okay, well, yeah, that's true. It's very challenging, but all the more you really have to invest a lot of time, talent, resources to make sure that your connectivity, your platforms are secure. So at the bank, we take that very seriously, and you can imagine we obviously have a very, a very complete compliance team, risk assessment team, operations team, and we have all the committee meetings leading up to the board level and governed by the central bank, which requires this kind of oversight. So, well, suffice to say, let me put it this way: the traditional bank has always had these check and balance structures, right? So that maintains. In a digital world, you are just really augmenting what used to be there in a more digital manner. So all of the technology goes through the same risk assessments, gets reported, monitored, audited, regulated in the same manner. So I'm obviously oversimplifying it, but that's really what happens for a traditional bank trying to do more digital. It's not like we throw away the old, we just build and enable it on top of. But definitely a lot of time, resources have to, I mean, we've hired a lot of new talent precisely to do that and enhance that, because like I said, it's trust that we are working with here, and that one you cannot fail.
Yeah, I think that's a good word, actually, RV, trust. And Robert, you mentioned that you're aggregating bank accounts. How do you build that trust so that people are willing to give you that access on your platform?
Well, we find there's a sort of a fundamentally different way we think about data than the big four banks. You know, the big four banks have always thought about data as about how do I get as much data as I can for marketing purposes so I can flog a customer another product. The way we think about data is how do we use that data to give the customer some genuine value. And so as long as we give customers genuine value, they'll be happy to provide us with data. And so to the extent that they're providing us with all their account details and all their account information, it's valuable to them because we're presenting it back to them in a way that helps them. But fundamental to what we do is if people no longer want to give us our data, we make it really, really easy for them to delete that data. It's just basically one click and it's all gone. So we give customers control of that data. Just to pick up on the question around APIs and how do you develop in a remote world, one of the unique things we do is we actually run 2 live versions of our app at all times, a green environment and a blue environment. Both of them point to our core banking system. Both of them are live. But what this allows us to do is do integrations, do feature development, to do UX changes, UI changes in the staff app, and it's all live. And then we basically use the 100-strong team, which is 86400 Bank, to do the final testing. And then we can back out changes if they don't work, or we can push the button basically and switch it through to the customer one. So this is more like an e-commerce approach to apps as opposed to a bank. And that means we can move much, much faster than our traditional bank. So we release our app on average every 2 weeks with new features. And we've actually done it more likely on a weekly basis the last few months.
Wow. There's a question for you here, Robert, from the audience. Sandeep is asking, how do you go about transforming bankers into digital natives?
I'm not sure I'd try and turn a traditional bank into a digital native. When I say digital native, I think it's digitally curious. So, we don't expect all our team to be able to code, for example. but we do expect them to be able to use the tools to run the bank digitally. And we typically look for, a good example would be in our risk team. So in our risk team, we have what the regulator described as some crusty old bankers, which is actually what you need because, they're very, very experienced on risk. But that team as well are also what I would call digitally curious. They're really keen to leverage the tools and to use their risk knowledge to pick the best tools to manage the rest of the business. So we don't necessarily transform people into digitally natives. We chase the people who've got both banking experience and are curious about technology.
Okay, perfect. Adrian, you mentioned at the beginning that you're looking to take over as a primary bank account from users. So is that going to be how you quantify success for your bank?
That is definitely our ambitions. But I think what we're trying to do is transform or reinvent the banking experience in Hong Kong. When you think about, why we would have virtual banks, simply because these days with technology help, we can actually reinvent the banking experience to something easier. You can just do it on your phone. You don't need to go to branches, line up and wait for hours to be served. But at the same time, a lot of the password security controls has been done at the back end because we are one of the virtual bank that is regulated by the Hong Kong banking regulators. So there are controls in place, and we are being monitored regularly, and customers' security is one of our highest priorities. So these are things that we believe if with that vision, a lot of the customers will move off the traditional banking experience or habits, but moving their primary bank to something that's actually on the virtual bank or on the handphone. So with our capabilities and track record in the past, this is definitely something we believe we can aim for.
Okay, great. Arvi, how are you guys managing success of your bank?
There's still a lot to do. I keep going back to the 70% unbanked. And we're talking about unbanked in the most basic way. This is payments, then you have credit, they don't even have any investment opportunity. And that changes everything. So there's still so much to do, but it's exciting to be, well, I'd say a little more ready than others. And also very, very positive about how the government is now really pushing a lot of adoption, a lot of digital solutions. And, I think what we had planned for maybe a 2-3 year adoption roadmap, all of a sudden became a 6 to 12 month roadmap, which is good. It's just that the future arrives sooner. So you have two things you have to do. You have to, prepare for the future now, and you have to rethink what you envisioned as the future. So those are the things we're working on. But let me just point that question further. If you say success, I would say it's not products and services, it's capabilities. Because the future might change or pivot, but what we are building are our capabilities. The ability to be customer centric and move his money everywhere, anywhere to his choice. The ability to with his consent, use his data for his advantage. These are capabilities we're building rather than products and services. So I believe I'm very happy with the capabilities we've built and the roadmap we have moving forward. And I think it's aligned with the future we all see coming, and part of it's already here.
So success is more about empowering your customers to do more on your platform.
Yes, I believe
Robert,
that switching costs will probably go down to zero. I mean, once you have all these platforms and open banking becomes a reality,
right.
It's going to be a near zero switching cost, and it'll just be a customer experience that's going to really change the game.
Robert, as you're aggregating accounts, is switching something that you use as a metric or not really?
We don't. One of the things that we've worked on a lot is that The reality in Australia, and I'm not sure perhaps in the Philippines or in Hong Kong, but you know, no one ever wakes up in the morning and has a cup of coffee and says, "Look, today's the day I'm going to move banks." It's my first priority, and it's super exciting because you know banking is just not that exciting. And so what we've done is rather than focused on getting people to switch, we've focused on just getting people to try us. So we're not sort of asking people to get married on the first date. We're actually just asking them to go on the first date. And so what we do is we allow someone to open an account in under 2 minutes. Basically under 2 minutes, download the app, you're live, Apple Pay is ready to go, and you can transact, and we've got the aggregated accounts. And so we're sort of saying, hey, you don't have to switch, just try us. And then over time, people will do more and more with us. So we actually don't look at the metric of how many primary bank accounts we have, how many salaries are coming in, because quite frankly, what we're seeing is people are not necessarily closing their big four Australian bank account. They're keeping that open. Their salary is still going in there because it's a pain in the neck to change it. And then they're automatically transferring most of that balance to us. And so the big four bank probably still thinks that they're their main customer, but the reality is all the transactions are happening with us. And so it's a gradual thing, and it's a mindset thing. You know, I think it's wrong for people to think they can get everyone just to switch on day one. People are going to do things with multiple banks. They're going to try us. They're going to do more and more with us over time. But we don't expect them to do everything with us. And that's a different thinking to the way traditional banks have thought. They've always thought about, I need a primary customer and they should do everything with me. Well, the reality is we don't do everything with one person anymore in the world. That's a very old world thinking.
Yeah. Arvi, we have another question about the unbanked. Is it realistic to reach all of the unbanked, and what is a good strategy to try and optimize this?
Well, the strategy we employ, well, in the Philippines, you have the digital wallets who are going very retail to try to reach the unbanked. They've gained quite a bit of success in terms of scale, but not in profitability, right? They're still burning through a lot of cash, trying to really monetize payments part. So they're scaling in terms of customer usage and engagement, but challenged in terms of profitability. Now, that's retail. The retail approach is one way to reach the unbanked. What we like to do is we do have a mass market group that focuses also on retail, but retail in terms of groups. So we have groups of, for example, a lot of the Department of Education public school teachers are our customers in a savings bank we own, which is called City Savings, and they do teachers loan specific. That's about 800,000 teachers. So that's one community you service. We have our eye-to-eye rural bank platform. And this one I like because it's more a wholesale approach, if you will. We're enabling rural bank financial institutions with capabilities. And so if we enable them, they onboard their customers on the platform. So it's like a wholesale approach rather than going individually retail. And I think that's more viable. And we like that approach because these financial institutions, these smaller mom and pop operators, money transfer operators, remittance centers, they pepper the country, and we're 7,100 islands, right? 42,000 little townships. No one institution, not even all of us combined, are going to reach all of those locations. So number one, it has to be very collaborative. You're going to have to work with existing players on the ground, okay? Number two, you have to think about those wholesale relationships, those rural bank communities. We're never going to have presence in those rural communities, but the rural banks are there. If we enable them, does that also help their capabilities? And therefore, does that strengthen their balance sheet? And if they're all on a digital platform, can we now offer loans either wholesale to the rural bank or eventually retail directly to their customers? So it changes the game if you start to enable these communities. And it again goes back to our purpose. We were about enabling these communities to be self-sustaining. And we believe that if we enable their communities, we don't have to have direct contact with their customers. They can happily stay their customers. We don't want them. They can service them better. But if we service these communities, then I think that's a more viable approach to reach this 42,000 barangays.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to talk a bit more about technology in terms of, we're seeing some of the traditional banks now enabling you to access the bank accounts using facial recognition, biometrics and things like that. You know, how do you see the importance of those types of technologies with digital banks, given that they can't go to a branch? Are you constantly looking at new types of technologies for helping with this type of thing? Maybe Adrian, you could talk about the Hong Kong market.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think those technology is very important. As I mentioned, to make a virtual bank successful, it has to be secured, equally secure to a traditional bank's experience. The fact that we can onboard a customers within 5 minutes, a turnaround time, I think we need to have a seamless experience for the customer. One, for them to provide the data. Two, for the bank to validate who they are. But more importantly is, you know, during those 5 minutes, we are able to assess whether this customer is a suitable a person or is a genuine person for us to onboard as a customers, based on the regulations, especially on the anti-money laundering regulations. So I think the technology that enable us to perform all these duties in those 5 minutes is very important. Again, it's about, you know, whether we can actually, from a bank side, we protect our, to examine our liability, but also on the customer side, they will see the experience is very smooth and also much easier than the way that we open a traditional bank account. So I think this is something that, you know, all banks, not just the virtual banks in Hong Kong, but in around the world, we would want to streamline it and also find a better way to work on both sides to achieve a win-win situation. I can see Avi keep nodding his head while I'm talking, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, if I may, Adrian, because you touched on that very important point. Yes, that should be the main, I guess, that should be the main use of technology, at least even from traditional banks. Let's go to facial recognition. I mean, what it changed was in the Philippines, when you opened a bank account, you really had to do face-to-face verification. I have to know this is Adrian. Let me see the identification. Oh, yes. Okay. That was a requirement of the regulator. Now, when we were proposing, and we were the first bank to do digital account opening, also completely digital, download the app, in 3 minutes, you have your account, you just upload everything. The technology behind it, let me just be clear, because I think some people are not very clear. There's intelligent technology behind that. You're not just taking a picture. When you talk about facial recognition, first of all, that beats the human eye. I know that this is really Adrian who's matching the ID. And this ID, you know, I can, in the likes of Hong Kong or Australia or Singapore, they can check the database and say that this ID is authentic and it's real. It's not forged. In our case in the Philippines, the databases are not ready yet, but the technology has been updated so that it knows these are the proper driver's license of the years 1999 to 2004 passports. So it's intelligent enough that it'll definitely beat the human eye, right? And that's the main problem of identification in the Philippines. And that's also why it was approved, because, you know, digital account opening in a way is safer than somebody eyeballing your ID and saying, okay, this is Adrian, this is Robert, you can open the account.
I guess it's easier in countries where you have a national ID, like in Hong Kong, and soon we'll have the EID coming. So it will make it much easier, I guess, to authenticate to platforms. Robert, how do you authenticate to your platform in Australia?
We use a digital ID process, which is basically an accumulation of government documentations that we're checking digitally. We open the account instantaneously. For mortgages, we actually do an additional layer of checking. We use a partner called Max ID that allows us to do that. The wider issue of security, though, gets asked all the time. And what people don't realize is that because we are an app-only bank, that we are actually far more secure than traditional internet banking. Internet banking, all you need is basically credentials and a password and you're away. With an app-based bank like ourselves, where we have a very sophisticated device binding partner, so the account, core banking system and the phone are bound together, and basically unless you have your phone and it's you who's logged into that phone, and you know, I won't go into the technical details because I'm not the right person to explain them, but effectively you need to have your phone, be using your phone and be in the right place to access the account, and then put your credentials and your Face ID as well. So it's actually significantly more secure than traditional internet banking, which people kind of don't really think about. Internet banking per se is one of the least secure ways to do your banking.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think most people probably see internet banking and mobile banking as the same thing.
Very different from a security basis, and we're a much more secure infrastructure in terms of what we do versus a traditional internet banking.
Great, thank you. Well, time has flown. We have 5 minutes left. There's one question for Rob, but it is talking about the future, and we were going to have a final closing statement from everybody. So maybe Rob, you can answer this question as your closing statement. The question is, what does 86400 consider as the biggest competitive threat in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, we focus very heavily on obviously the 4 large dominant banks in Australia, because they have 80% market share, and that's where we spend our time. We only need to take a very, very small market share of that to be very, very successful. But we'd like to take we didn't do all the work to get a full banking license and start a bank to be small. We want to do bigger than that. But we also watch closely what's happening with the technology companies wider, and not necessarily them becoming banks, but clearly the large fintechs are moving into the ecosystem of banks. And so, where we can partner with those, that also makes sense. But we see the future, the pace of change, the technology, and I think correctly the demand from consumers about what they want and the value they should get is going to fundamentally change in the next 3 to 5 years.
Great, thank you. Avi, your closing statement?
Well, I mean, I guess to close, the future I see has to be an even more collaborative future. Whether you're building, connectivity, or you're building platforms from the ground up, you cannot think, operate, build in a silo. You have to make sure that you're interoperable, you can be interconnected, and that's what makes it really more compelling. 10 years ago, a lot of the technology in the bank, we had to build from the ground up. In an era of fintechs and partners and startups and digital banks, when Robert can have his customers, and if I can connect to him and I can transfer, if I can have that connectivity and let the customers use him as a wallet, and it works out that way, let the customer decide. But again, if I don't have that mindset and that capability, and I build in a closed environment, that could be detrimental. So I guess I want to leave the audience with the thinking that, building and digital transformation, especially now, it has to be open and collaborative. It cannot be siloed and closed, because that's really, I guess, the scariest type of builds. I mean, I'm sure these guys, we come across many startups or many tech companies or many banks that have built things closed, and therefore it's very hard to undo that. So that's not preparing for a future. That's preparing for reliving the past, which is something we don't want to do.
And finally, Adrian, your closing statement.
Thank you. I think the next 3 to 5 years, it will be a very exciting period of banking in Hong Kong. One, because the technology allow us to do a lot of things with our mobile phone. But more importantly is, after this COVID-19 experience, I think more and more customers will try to do banking, offline instead of doing a traditional bank way. So I think the key thing is to ensure that we continue to be agile, and also fast enough to reacting to what the customer needs are, and at the same time ensure we can earn the customer trust. The good thing is, most of the bank in Hong Kong, we are monitored or regulated by the Hong Kong banking regulators. So these are the confidence that we can build on that platform, and allow customers to enjoy a new kind of banking experience.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you to all my panelists. It has a really informative panel. So I think, building a culture is really important, and I'll definitely be using my mobile app for banking more than I use my internet banking. So thanks for that, Robert.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Wow, what a panel, guys. Thank you so much. I think so much content to unpack there. I'm sure many of our attendees will also be making use of the on-demand feature afterwards to go back and just sort of have another listen through some of those insights after the fact. So thank you so much. It was really great hearing all of your insights. We're now moving back into the track sessions. So we are taking a break in the banking track for half an hour, but we've got sessions in the financial inclusion and payments innovation track. So please do take a look there. In particular, there's a session in the payments track on protecting and growing your business in a pandemic economy, which you might well want to check out. Thank you again to all of our speakers. If you'd like to carry on the conversation with them, you can find them in the speakers section and you can send them a connection request within the event platform and continue the conversation with them there. So thank you again, guys. Really fantastic panel and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.